And welcome, everybody. I'm Carol Master. I'm anchor of Bloomberg Business Week radio and television. I am so pleased to have all of you with us. We've got an incredible panel coming up, a really remarkable set of leaders. We're going to be talking about the customer comes first. And so we're really highlighting some of the businesses that are out there that have made a difference, have certainly made their mark on their industries. And in this think tank, we're going to be focusing on those companies that really have thought about the customer deeply and have really prioritized their customer in all that they do. We do have, as I said, an incredible lineup of participants. We'll get to that conversation in just a minute. I do have a little bit of housekeeping. Keep in mind, in this virtual world, there are often technical problems. If you do have any problems, if you're having trouble with audio or your video quality, just refresh your browser. That tends to often fix any problems. You can also open the event chat box. It's in the bottom right corner of your screen. So if you have any problems and you need some help, please reach out to us. We'd also love to hear from you. This is an interactive conversation. Like I said, it's an incredible panel and a lineup of participants. So do send me your questions while we chat along, and I'll try to bring in as many as I can and incorporate them into the conversation. We're also active on social media. So join the conversation. We're at Bloomberg Live. We're on LinkedIn, Twitter, and also on Facebook. And you can use the hashtag Bloomberg50. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge our wonderful sponsor. We're talking about Salesforce. Please welcome me, or join me, I should say, in welcoming Tiffany Bova. She's Chief Growth Evangelist at Salesforce. She's going to say a few words. Tiffany.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Tiffany Bova, and I'm the Growth and Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce. It's great to be with you today to discuss the importance of customer centricity. Look, nothing has pushed the necessity of digital creativity and a focus on customers quite like the COVID-19 pandemic. It's never been more important to listen to customers, deliver relevant, personalized experiences, and anticipate their needs. That's why we partner with Bloomberg Media to conduct the Customer Centricity Index. The index recognizes brands that are the best at keeping the customer at the center of everything they do, based on 6 key attributes. One was anticipating customer needs. The next is delivering exceptional customer service, caring about customers, offering relevant products and services, being easy to do business with, and being honest with the public. We're excited to have some of the recipients of the Customer Centricity Awards here with us today, such as Nordstrom. And it's not our index that has surfaced these key themes and focus areas. Salesforce's 2020 State of the Connected Customer Survey found that 90% of respondents say how a company acts now reveals its trustworthiness in the future. So how do you change course now to be a trusted customer-centric brand? It starts with uniting your teams and empowering them with the tools to connect, collaborate, and deliver the seamless experiences that keep customers happy and coming back. Let's delve into more on people, brands, and ideas that are serving the customer. I'm excited about this conversation with all of you today, so thank you for joining us.
All right, Tiffany, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And I'd like to now first bring in our first speaker. He was on the Bloomberg 50 list last year, 2019 version. We're delighted to have him back as a B50 alum. I'm talking about Brian Nichol, the chairman and CEO of Chipotle. So we're going to start there. Brian, it's great to have you here again and talk with you. How are you? How's your world?
Yeah, well, like everybody, it's always changing.
Yeah.
So, but thanks for asking. Obviously, as a company, we are hanging in there. Most importantly, our employees and families associated with the company are all doing just fine. So we're in good shape.
Brian, I want to ask you, and we're going to look forward, but I want to ask you about when you first got to Chipotle. You understand about companies dealing with crises and having to think about their customers, think about their employees. You really righted the ship when you got to Chipotle back in 2018. So when you first got there, what did you want to know after the problems at the company? What did you want to know about the customer and where they were, what they were thinking about your brand?
Yeah, that's exactly right. The very first step was, where are our customers? What are their thoughts, feelings, trust, level of engagement, belief systems. So, step one for me was understanding that. And then also the other piece too was understanding where our employees were. Our company, our experience is really driven by our employees. So did they feel like they were on their front foot? Did they feel like they were on their back foot? Because if their experience is, one of defensive, I think our customer feels that it's a defensive experience as well. So we really spent a lot of time, frankly, in the first couple months, diving into understanding both of those things. And frankly, that's what's driven our strategies from day one.
Well, and it's interesting. What did you maybe learn about those first 2 years in the company and dealing with that, and then getting to the current crisis? And again, the customer, right, was worried. Your employees were worried as well.
Yeah. So, look, when we went back, if you rewind the tapes here, a couple of years ago, what consumers were saying to us, or customers were saying to us, is, you guys need to get back to talk about what makes your company special. Remind me why I feel good about eating at Chipotle. And, the answer was they felt good about eating at Chipotle because it's real culinary, it's ingredients with integrity. We take a different approach to how we prepare and cook our food. And so that was really what enabled strategy number one, which was around being more visible and, frankly, more loved. And, we really set down that mission of just talking about what makes Chipotle unique. The other thing that we knew we had to do was dial up our culture of safety and wellness. And, our employees, they viewed the practices as more of an initiative, not an ongoing culture. And, in my opinion, it's like, look, we can only have employees working if they're 100% healthy. So it sounds harsh, but we had to install a zero tolerance policy on this, where if you don't do the wellness check and you're not honest on your wellness check, you will lose your job. We've got no tolerance for that. And so that was a tough, couple months, because I got a lot of emails from people saying, like, I can't believe I lost my job because I didn't do wellness checks.
Wow.
And, it was like, look, this is our culture. If you want to be a part of our company, that's what we do. And also, if you're not truthful, we've got two problems. One, we're a company of high integrity. And two, you're putting our company at risk when you're not truthful, whether or not you have symptoms. And, oh, by the way, we have a program where you get paid sick leave. So there's no incentive, to not tell us the truth. So, doing things like that materially changed the culture. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes a couple stories being retold about we're really meaning business on this zero tolerance approach to wellness and food safety, as well as then, reminding our consumers why they love Chipotle was at the forefront of what we really instituted day one. And, that just got us back to running great restaurants again. It was like, look, if we know we have healthy employees, we know we're practicing the right protocols, we can focus on making delicious guacamole, terrific chicken, the rice correctly. And every detail matters in our business.
Right. So, this was a crazy year, disruptive. It was an upsetting year, as you well know. You guys, you're very purpose driven. I mean, it's really in the DNA of your company. How have you as an organization and as a company kind of demonstrated that in 2020?
Yeah, look, I think I'm really proud of how our company has done that. I think we've been tested numerous times on whether or not we were going to be true to our values and our purpose. And I think we've stepped up and done that in every way. So whether it was when the pandemic hit, I had a lot of employees that were worried they were going to lose their job. And then when they realized, we've got a really healthy balance sheet. Fortunately, we are an essential business. We're going to be able to continue to operate. Not only are you not losing your job, we're going to, because I know other people in your family probably have been impacted, we're going to increase wages for temporary. And we honored first quarter bonuses because, look, January and February, the guys were doing an unbelievable job. March hit and it wiped out what would have been their bonus. And that just wasn't the right thing to do. And, fortunately, we were in a position to do it. So we did it. And, it was those types of examples that, I think we stepped up with our values and making those decisions consistent with our values time and time again. And, I don't know if you've seen our Roundup for Real Change program that we've instituted as well. But, we did that because we wanted to participate on a bigger level on these various causes that are important, from, historically Black colleges all the way to the FarmLink program that we're doing right now.
Well, I was going to ask you more specifically about some of the investments you guys did in your people that have benefited the organization. And also, you were focusing on digital when you hit the ground, when you took over the CEO spot, but you really, amped it up big time in terms of what was going on in the pandemic and reaching your customer. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, look, one of the things that was fortunate is we made one of the early decisions to go very aggressive into digital access. And that actually came out of that consumer study I talked about earlier, which is a lot of our younger consumers were saying, geez, I love Chipotle, but why can't I have more access, specifically digital access?
Mm-hmm.
And so we went full tilt on putting in that digital experience. And, luckily, we finished implementing all of that in December of 19. And then, March of 20 happens. And, our digital business went from like 5% of sales to about 20% of sales around January, February. Then COVID, then COVID hit, became 80% of our business, 90% of our business. And now it is about 50% of our business. So, it's going to be a $2.5 billion business this year. Which is pretty amazing. If you think
didn't you just open your first digital store too, completely digital?
We did. Yeah, we did in Highland Falls, New York. And, I'm happy to say that's off to a really good start too. So, there's definitely demand. And the thing I love about that Highland Falls store is if we didn't have a digital only restaurant, we probably wouldn't be in that trade area. It allows us to go into new areas as well, which we knew there was demand. It wouldn't have made sense to open a regular Chipotle.
So I do wonder too, as a leader, Brian, where you've had to deal with multiple crises, right? And this one was like no other. None of us had the playbook, to be fair. What have you learned as a leader and how you communicate too with, your team internally and also with the customer?
Yeah, look, the more transparent you can be and the more frequent with your communication, the better. And I think one of the things we've learned is we probably weren't communicating enough with all 100,000 employees. And, now we are in a much better rhythm. Obviously when the pandemic started, we were probably meeting more than is sustainable. But what we realized is, we need to be doing this more often. Our folks want to understand what's happening. They don't want to hear it second and third hand. They want to hear it from the leaders. And, so that probably is the most important thing. And I think the other thing too is being honest with people. Like, you know what, this is tough.
Yeah.
Like, we're making decisions as we go. I'm going to need you to be flexible. As we get new information, we're going to pivot as an organization. And at the end of the day, I have your best interest at heart. So when we pivot, we're doing it because I believe in the end, it's the best thing to give you a safe work environment and a safe environment for our customer. But I was honest with these guys. I was like, look, I don't have the answers to this. I've never been through a global pandemic. But we're going to make decisions and we're not going to be afraid to make decisions. And when we get feedback, we'll course correct.
Hey, one last question before we open it up. What changed too this year? We had the health pandemic. We had what happened with George Floyd in Minneapolis and other Black Americans. We talked about the divides, the great divides in this country. So what changed with a company and its brand and its relationship with a customer and maybe its broader community this year that you think maybe stays with us?
Yeah, well, look, I think it's what we have heard from our customers is it matters what else you do besides just make burritos. And it matters in a big way. And, I think we're very fortunate because as a company, we've always been a very inclusive organization, Black, Hispanic, LGBTQ, everybody. One of the things I love about our business is everybody has an opportunity to grow and achieve their ambitions if their capabilities match their ambition. And, you probably can't say that everywhere, but we know we can say that. And, look, I did these, we called them real talks. And, part of this was too an education of what are you hearing? What are you feeling? What can we do to support our culture of inclusiveness? And, look, there was some stuff that just tore your heart apart, when you hear somebody talking. And then there was other things where I was really proud of what our company was doing to support folks. And, I'm probably much more aware and than I was. I thought we were doing a good job, I found out we could be better, and now we're committed to being better. So that's how that's how I would describe it.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that we all, in talking to colleagues or talking to our customers or talking to friends, we all learned that we could be a lot better. Brian, thank you. Don't go anywhere. I do want to widen this out if I can and bring
Sure.
up our amazing panel. I have to say, I was counting the boxes. There's 9 of you, which was essentially my family dinner every night because I'm one of 7 kids. So I feel pretty comfortable, but I will say it used to get a little rowdy. So we're going to see how this is going to go. I'm not going to pose every question to everyone, but raise your hand if you want to jump in and layer in on the conversation. Please, please don't be shy. I do want to point out we've got 2 Brians, so I'll try to be really specific. We've got a Peter and a Pete, so I'm going to be really clear when directing a question. So let's start with customers in crisis, because man, this is what we all learned a lot about our customer during this pandemic, multiple crises really, to be fair. I'm going to start with Brian at GSK Healthcare, because healthcare wellness never mattered as much as it did today. Brian, what are you seeing from your customers, or what did you learn from your customers during this crisis?
Yeah, and you're right. We're in the consumer healthcare business. So the trends and the impact of COVID-19 on consumers and how they think about health and wellness has been pretty incredible. And, when we looked at the world pre-COVID, something like 77% of the world's population was interested in more proactively managing their health. But that's been completely turbocharged. The idea of going into this health crisis healthier and having a much better chance of coming out the other end, I think is something that's really been imprinted in the consumer psyche now. So we're seeing a big shift to this idea of consumers really proactively managing their health. If that's around immunity products or vitamins, minerals, and supplements to help manage their balance and their intake of nutrients, to how they're actually operating beyond the categories that we work in, of how they're managing their own health and their weight. So it's been a really significant shift.
Hang on for a second. I didn't introduce you all, and I feel so bad. So let me do that. We have Tiffany, of course, Bova, Chief Growth Evangelist from Salesforce. We have Peter Vanderdoes, co-founder and CEO of Audion. Jennifer Esterbrook, President of FILA North America. Rob Falzon, he's Vice Chair Prudential Financial, member of Prudential's Board of Directors. Brian McNamara, who you just heard from, CEO of GSK Consumer Healthcare. Brian Nichol, of course, of Chipotle Mexican Grill. Pete Nordstrom, President and Chief Brand Officer of Nordstrom. Barbara Weiss, Senior Vice President, Head of Global Operations at Groupon. And Sumit Singh, who is CEO and Director of Chewy, and a recent Business Week cover story and on our Bloomberg B50, like Brian at Chipotle last year. So this is what we call a get in my world. All right, so we just heard from Brian. Sumit, come on in on this, because the other thing that I noticed during the pandemic, as I walked my dog every night on really quiet, dark streets, but there were Chewy boxes at the curb everywhere. The customer cared about their pets.
This is a time when we saw customers really lean in with engagement, because it's a time of solitude in some way. And it's a time when relationships matter even more. And when everybody was in their own houses, unable to travel, I think pets kind of sort of brought us together. And that actually formulated, believe it or not, the central theme of one of our campaigns that we ended up launching across Zoom, gathering people across North America, bringing them together from different kind of ethnicities and origins and race and diversity, to be able to just, formulate a bond or bring forward a bond that was formed on the relationships, the fact that they had pets. And so, one, we really saw that. Two, what we saw is, we're a young company. We're 10 years this year, and we've grown, at the end of this year to be close to $7 billion in revenue, 20,000 people. But these people, our team members, have never actually worked remotely. And so one of our greatest challenge was, how do you take a workforce that's not enabled to, who was in office one day and then the global pandemic shows up, and you have to take let's say a customer service task force that is all North America, 24/7, and overnight migrate them to work from home. So we've had those kind of sort of internal challenges that we've navigated, keeping health and safety of team members up front, as well as figuring out business continuity while providing customers an experience that has been completely continuous or completely coherent. And one of the best parts of the pandemic for us has been, or at least a testament to our brand, has been wherever we took a bit of a pause to understand expectations and reset our experience so that we could be at par or better than we normally are, our loyal customers jumped in to the rescue of the brand. And you could see this on social media going on,
Right.
where when our service levels degraded at the peak of the pandemic, let's say delivery, and new customers were jumping in going, we aren't hearing enough from the company. Loyal customers, the older cohorts, were jumping in and saying, hey, this company's always been kind of pro-customer and customer centricity at the core. So, why don't we kind of give the company a break? And that was just awesome to see. I can go on, but I don't want to ramble here.
Well, I'm going to jump around. I want to bring in some of the kind of the other retail brands. Jennifer, come on in. What happened to Fila and the Fila customer during the crisis?
Well, interestingly, we have two levels of customer. We have our sell-in customer, that's the retailers, because we're mostly a wholesale business.
Right.
And then we had actually pivoted at the end of last year and said, we've got to start building our direct to consumer. So on the sell-in side, we had a lot of retailers cancel orders, ask for payment extensions. And so we worked with them. We wanted to, in March, you didn't know if people were going to survive, if the world was going to survive. We've never, as you said, there isn't any playbook. And so we did, even though we're a much smaller company than many of our retailer partners, we did everything we could to support the big ones and the small ones, payment extensions, whatever they needed, if they wanted to cancel orders, if they wanted to push them out. And it was the spirit of, we knew that if the retailers went into bankruptcy, we wouldn't survive. That would also be the end of us, because we need them to sell our product. So we really felt like part of our mission was to do what we needed to do and work with them, and there were, brands, some of our largest competitors that said, no way, you're not extending, you're not canceling, you're not doing anything. They just didn't work with the customers. So that was one way that we helped our retailers. And then in terms of the consumer, it was, we had a little bit of luck because we pivoted at the exact right time.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we started to do, first of all, we had planned a lot of experiential events. Everything was canceled, including the first professional sporting event that was canceled was the BNP Paribas Open, which we sponsor. So, and everyone is in a panic. So we said, we're going to use our tennis athletes to convey this message of stay home. And the athletes were from all over the world. So we pivoted to help people, to engage them, to amuse them and humor them. And then from a product standpoint, we quickly pivoted because just as the pandemic was hitting here, our sourcing operations were reopening in China. And so we were able to quickly pivot and provide the comfort, cozy products that people wanted at home. And because we were building our online business, we were able to see from the data what people were searching for and what they wanted. And so, throughout this, we've tried to engage them, keep them calm, do public service announcements, stay home.
Right.
This summer, we did a campaign to wear a mask. And so it has helped raise the profile while doing some good in the world. And I think all of even the retailers, we had a couple ones that filed in bankruptcy during the period, but everybody, when it was over, said, thank you so much for working with us and keeping us going.
I feel like community collaboration, digitization was a big couple of the themes. Peter from Nordstrom, come on in, because the retail world really, it was just, smacked down, shut down. It was really hard. I know your digital sales, I think, were up like 37% from last year in your most recent update to Wall Street. What happened to your customer initially?
Oh gosh, all this stuff that I'm hearing from everyone else in the panel, it's all super familiar. We're all in the same boat here.
Yeah.
There was so much uncertainty that I think that was probably the main thing. It was all new, it was all uncertain. And so we found ourselves really in the first time having an existential threat to our business. And we've been around 119 years, and I mean, personally, I've never really been involved in managing for cash flow and liquidity and all this. That sounds kind of obvious in business, but that's just not the position we've been in. So, internally, we had to really think about those things. But the thread that was going to pull us through, and I'm sure everyone on the panel would say the same thing, is the relationships you have with your customers, and that all the things you can do, whatever touch points you have, to engender trust and confidence. And luckily, we've got a lot of loyal customers, and we were able to pivot and find new ways to how to serve them. Luckily, we have a big digital business, and so that was pretty natural. That happened pretty easily. But it was so disruptive, and it continues to be. And there's a lot to be learned from that. And I guess the silver lining of all of it, it definitely reinforces, I think, to the theme you talked about at the beginning, is like, if you don't have customer centricity in terms of the way that you're viewing this, you're really going to be in trouble. And I think it kind of helped us redouble our efforts about putting the focus in the right place.
Peter from Ariane, come on in. You too saw some customer behavior change as a result of the pandemic, and your customers are other businesses: Uber, Tiffany, McDonald's, Groupon, Spotify, Microsoft. What did you hear from them?
Yeah, for us, it was, we were in the situation that as we have offices around the world, we had the Shanghai office who was hit by the pandemic much earlier, but also got out of it much earlier. So our first question was, what do merchants actually expect from us? So for merchants, we help them with the payment. We help them with everything around their consumer to make sure that they can compete on knowing everything about their customer, on the data around it, on making the payment really easy. And what we found out in Shanghai, we already learned our lessons there, that merchants were thanking us for being very proactive during the approach, because we also felt a little bit like, hey, we are doing relatively well, a lot of online volume, so we see more volume coming in. But we reached out to all our merchants through account management. And you see that during a crisis, that is really appreciated. There can be the merchant that says, look, I've other things on my mind. But what we found out, there are merchants which are doing a lot of refunds. And then our pricing was never intended for merchants which unfortunately had to refund 90 or 100% of their sales of the last month. So that stuff we came into. A lot of merchants were selling much more online, or were thinking about an online presence, but didn't have it. So we were developing new products with them to be able to pay through an email so that their customers could still shop with them. So it was a very intense time, and still is, with projects being canceled, but also suddenly new projects being started. Because what we typically saw in retail is that we had merchants where their online volume totally compensated for their stores. So first, you of course had the dip, consumers could not come into store, but if they also had an online presence, you saw a full compensation of that in the online world. And then when the stores opened, you saw a lot of that volume coming back through store, but actually the total was more than 100%. So some of that volume in new patterns was actually sticking. And that's what we still see, that the total for those merchants is still more than where they were before the pandemic.
Barbara, I want to bring you into this. You see a lot at Groupon, and you've been going through your own restructuring, but you've got B2B and B2C customers. You work with a lot of small businesses. We have talked a lot about the hit that small businesses have had, certainly with the shutdown of the economy. So what have you seen kind of from that two-sided marketplace that you've got? I think we have to unmute.
Does it work now? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, I was saying, the main difference with the other panelists is like we really have like a two-sided marketplace, and obviously our core business is being local and local merchants being hit very hard this year. So very similar to what other panelists have been talking about, which is really just listening to what their needs were. So our businesses are like health and beauty, restaurants. We talked about this earlier with Brian, and also everything around leisure and activities obviously hit very hard. So what I would say is like one, the agility, just moving very fast and changing based on their needs. So similar to what Peter was saying, is just helping them with tools. helping them manage capacity with the new restrictions. So we give them like some booking tools so that they can manage the capacity that has been reduced given the sanitary restrictions. We also, from a customer perspective, pivoted to new categories, and we saw very different buying patterns. Helping also some of our restaurants being able to do takeout and delivery, and for customers to be able to use actually their vouchers that were there. So definitely a lot of agility. I would say it's also a very humbling year, just looking at very closely at how the world is changing for those merchants and for customers. And I think actually probably a year where everyone learned a lot, definitely resilience, but also just in terms of agility and flexibility in pivoting the business, because it changes on a day-to-day basis. I mean, we operate in 14 different countries, and like countries like the UK just came out of lockdown today, for instance. So we're seeing, like, once again, life in the local businesses and how do we adapt to this with the new restrictions. So definitely a lot of listening to do. So that's what I would say as well.
Yeah, that was great. Rob, I want to bring in, you and I have talked a couple of times over this crisis about workers in crisis during the pandemic. What have you seen specifically when it comes to your customers and what your customers kind of expect as a result of kind of all the stresses that they've been dealing with?
Yeah, thanks, Carol. Maybe pull two threads together in the conversation that we've been having. One, Brian raised this issue. I wrote down something about, his customer experience is driven by his employees' experience. And then when Tiffany kicked this off, she mentioned your customer opinion is 90% driven by how you act now. And, as I think about, we've been around for 145 years, right? And as I think about, how our customers react to us, it's really driven by their experience with their employees. And that's around having sort of purpose and culture, right? So we went 98% remote in a week. Now, when you go from an environment where we weren't highly remote to one where you're 98% remote, you're relying on a lot of independent individuals to act in a way that's cohesive and in the interests of your customer. And the only way they're going to do that is if there's a shared culture, and there's a purpose behind what they do. So it ensures that they were there to manage the needs of our customers. And you talk about what we do. We actually provide financial resiliency during crises. That's what we're built to do. So periods like this, it's the phone's ringing off the hook, needless to say. And so that experience that our customers are having with us during the crisis really defines long-term how they feel about us as a place to go for their needs. And to the points that were made earlier, it's how you treat your customer. It's frankly how you treat your employees, and it's how you treat your community. So they're looking at all of that right now. And to the extent that you're there for them, and that's things like everyone has cited, in our particular case, it's around premium relief. It's around, there's difficulty with providing certifications with things these days. And so you sort of say, no problem, we'll pay, and we'll get to the certifications later. Providing ease of access to accounts and withdrawals and all these sorts of things that you do in order to make life better and easier for them in the midst of a crisis. It's around how you're treating your employees so that they feel good about what you're doing for customers and they feel like they're being appropriately rewarded and acknowledged for that. And then it's very obvious how you engage with the communities. We did something that I thought was relatively, small. We had, so we're an insurance company. We plan for pandemics, okay? It's in our business interruption plans. And so we got warehouses of masks and things that you would want to have in the case of a pandemic. And so we took those and we donated them, to medical facilities and critical workers during the pandemic. The dollar amount of that wasn't particularly large, but the impact of that was incredible, both to customers and employees when they see us conducting ourselves that way. So it goes back to the remark that Tiffany made around, 90% of that customer perception is going to be around how you're conducting yourselves. So that's been our experience.
Tiffany, come on in too on what you saw with the Salesforce customer during the pandemic.
Yeah, what's been really amazing is that pre-pandemic, we were watching that experience was now the new product and sort of how people felt when they engaged with brands. And we anticipated that to almost be equal in 2023. And we've seen it almost accelerate where now people are just so very focused on it. But we've had some brands, like someone like Bentley, which is known for such a quality product, but yet had a very disconnected experience from the time someone was interested in purchasing a car to purchasing the car to getting served on the car, and how could they pull that all together really, and starting to focus on the digital aspect of experience, not just the in-store aspect. And so as the pandemic first hit, it was really about stabilizing the business and communicating with customers, and then getting everybody back to work in a safe manner. And everyone's really mentioned the employee experience side of this, which I think is really critical. The fastest way to get your customers to love your brand is to get your employees to love their job, because then they will deliver those really amazing experiences. And so having that single view of the customer has become far more important, because the expectations in so many of these brands that are on the panel today are held up as examples that others aspire to be, because now these expectations of consumers and buyers have shifted so quickly over the last 6 or 8 months. We may never go back to the way that it was from an expectation standpoint. And that's where experience really lends itself, even for brands, as well known and old as Bentley is. So it's been really inspiring to see, both on the small business side and large enterprise side, how people have been resilient and responsive during this time.
I've got an audience question coming in, and I want to put this out to Brian at Chipotle. Are customers' wishes and desires always right, and our duty to fulfill them, or should we try to orient them to what we know from our experience is better for them? I can imagine, Brian, how many times you get something from a customer or something saying, why don't you offer this, or why don't you do it this way? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, look, we've got a very purposeful approach. We say there are times where we want to listen and follow the lead of the customer, and then there are times where we want to lead the customer. So, it's not one or the other. Frankly, we try to do both. And, like a perfect example is we've been working on trying to get a quesadilla out and about. It's the #1 requested item from our customers. Please. Meanwhile, we're also leading customers, I know, with cauliflower rice, right? There's not a groundswell for cauliflower rice, but we know eating trends down the road, it's the right thing to do. So, you'll see us kind of blend both leading the consumer and then also listening and following the consumer.
Does anybody else have some thoughts on that question about customers' wishes? Just show a hand or something. And Peter at Adyen, go ahead.
And we have developed our company around being able to work with customers. Many of our customers move from country to country. So when you do a rollout as a merchant and you go to the next country, you want support. And we have been working with our merchants on what's the next thing. If you look at data, what's the next data point that you want to know? And that has been the guideline how we developed our product. And it has influenced our organization because we can really build those products very quickly and have a structure where the commercial people can really easily work together with engineering, and where we can quickly push out products. So that has huge implications on how we build the company to be able to do that. So we really use the merchant to guide us to what's the next thing we release.
Anybody else want to jump in? Go ahead. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it's what consumers can absolutely tell you is what are their unmet needs, what do they desire to have, what do they need to help them going forward in healthcare, and what they can't necessarily tell you of what the answer to that question is, right? So I feel like it's a combination of listening to consumers, understanding the trends, and then translating that into a product or solution that helps them move in that direction. And there also is the balance of there's things that you may know about what's happening in our case in healthcare and where those trends are going that consumers may not see. So you definitely need to do a balance of both. I mean, you need to listen to your consumers, understand their needs, provide solutions, but also try to be ahead of them also.
One thing I want to ask you guys about is a trade-off between focusing on your customer and do you have to give up some profitability to do so? Does anybody want to take that? Because I am curious about that we're always, we've talked more and more about multiple stakeholders, right? It's your employee, it's your supply chain, it's your investor. It's a lot more that we need to think about. But when you're having those discussion about,
Carol,
go ahead.
I'll start. One of my personal greatest learnings when I joined Chewy was I was born and brought up in a cost-constrained environment, and when I came to Chewy, I really knew how to drive efficiency in a business. And customer centricity was always in the back of the mind. But what I saw at Chewy actually blew me away. I sat down, my first couple of weeks, I sat down with my customer service teams and I spent some time there. And customer service, by the way, still directly reports to me. And here's the reason for that. What I found was that we didn't recognize customer service as a cost center at all. And that was, first of all, there was a bit counterintuitive to me. And I was like, okay, I think there's something here. Let me listen a little bit harder. And what I found was that when we said, hey, customer service is an engagement mechanism for us or a revenue generation center, I started listening even harder. And we're all data-driven leaders. And so went back and got some data. And what we can say via data is the level of investment that we put behind our customer service, the social media teams that we run within our customer service, our policies that we communicate via the experiences that we build, or the pure investments that we make in delivering a high-touch, personalized service that is almost unheard of in today's world. What's an example of that? Even today, at the scale that we're operating at, we don't have any automated voice lines. We have human beings picking the phone. Our customer service agents aren't subjected to any metrics like average handle time or productivity. They essentially are encouraged to interact with the customer in a happy, friendly manner and take care and solve the problem, regardless of how long it takes. Wow. And what that's done for us is we can show via data that the cohort of customers that interacts with our customer service has greater lifetime value and greater retention versus the customers who haven't been exposed yet to our friendly, personalized, or high-touch customer service. So, from our standpoint, investing in experience building and customer service in some way is a way to generating profits. So the two are actually not separate or not counter or competitive with each other at all, in my opinion.
Peter at Nordstrom, you want to come in on this? Because I think about, I think for such a long time, Nordstrom has been really thought of as that customer-centric experience. And I'm just curious, how do you measure it? How do you make sure you're doing the right things in terms of what your customer really wants?
Well, I like that question about if it's a competing agenda, whether you're doing stuff for customers or shareholders. I think that's great. And actually, one of the things we talked about recently was that when you do things that solve problems for customers and makes them feel good, it's in the best interest of shareholders. So I think that that's important. I mean, look, we're a public company and we know we're accountable for those results. But, you also, and a lot of people have talked about it here, how to engage your people and your teams to, really be the face of the brand. And you're not going to win the hearts and minds with your team by getting behind this big rallying cry of shareholder value or, economic profit, or, it's not that those things are wrong and they're fine principles, but you got to find things that can galvanize people on a mission that everyone can buy into and play a role in. And for us, to keep the customer stuff front and center, I think if you're a good business, if it's good for customers, you got to figure out how you can make money. And after you figure out what's great for customers. So, it's just been core to our DNA that we stick to that. Obviously there's a reactive part of what we do and having to respond what customers want, but we want to try to lead to and just try to anticipate some of those things as well. And I think one of the things that helps us do that is, how competitive the marketplace is. There's so many great companies out there really doing innovative and interesting things that I think that helps keep us moving forward and acting in ways that's in the best interest of customers.
Hey, Rob, what's your thoughts when it comes to a company's purpose and how it relates to customer centricity?
Well, we were a very early adopter of this multi-stakeholder capitalism kind of approach. Our roots are actually as a mutual insurance company. And for those that don't know what that means is, we're actually owned by our customers at a point in time. And so there's no conflict. And that culture has sort of survived in our organization. I'd go back to the connection I made earlier, which is I think, to us, this is a virtuous cycle, which is if you start with your employees, frankly, because long-term, frankly, is, as I said, 145 years, the only thing we found that works long-term is talent. everything else goes away or someone else meets it, or there's a shelf life to it. The only thing that remains competitive over a long period of time is investment that you make in your talent. And if you start there and then you connect that talent to the customer, you create a culture, and that drives profitability. Will every time, because if you look across industries, which you'll always find across any industry, is that there are a handful of players who significantly outperform the rest of the industry, and the real profits are to be made by those handful of players in that segment. And invariably what happens is they have a differentiated model of providing a different experience, or a product or solution to their customers, and they're invariably the places that people want to go to work. And so if you can connect that investment in talent to a differentiated delivery to your customer, that's going to result in sustainable profits that are going to be significantly differentiated from the rest of the pack.
Did anybody else want to jump in on customer and profits or anything before I move on?
I'd like to.
I would.
I'm going to.
Barbara, why don't you start?
Okay.
Go ahead, and then we'll move around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, when someone was talking earlier about just being mission driven and what Groupon offers for merchants, like this unique marketing channel, we also have like the luxury of actually there's no upfront cost and upfront payment from a merchant. So our profits and the customer interest here, the merchants and even our customers, are completely lined up. And I really firmly believe that you have to inherently believe that the customer interest, like here, our merchants and our customers, will, in the long term, if this is your long-term destination, turn into profit. There's tons of evidence in this. Like Sumit was talking earlier about the satisfaction when you measure it from customer service, the resolution rate, and how it has an impact on the repurchase rate later on. Same thing on the merchant front. Like it's directly correlated. The merchant centricity, the customer centricity, and then future profits. Same for also by the way on employees, right? In terms of the engagement and like having a purpose and a mission and feeling that they're doing something good for merchants and for customers, it also has like an impact on their engagement and also their performance.
Right, everything has to be in alignment. Customer culture, or culture, employees, customers. Peter at Adyen, I know you wanted to jump in before. Come on in.
Yeah, I think the point that Sumit made about not measuring certain things to allow the freedom there, that's something that I recognize very well and that resonates, because we have a lot of merchants that deal with us in different countries. So they would deal with us in the US, but also say in Brazil. What we have as a company, we are not measuring per country, but we have only one P&L to avoid that Brazil would say, maybe I want to spend more time on a merchant which is in my P&L than helping that US merchant, which is now rolling out in Brazil. So therefore you give up a local P&L and sort of the local measurement of the team for the benefit of the merchant, where the merchant gets the best service from us as a team, as a group at Adyen. And so I like to hear that also, that Sumit says, don't measure too much around customer support, because you want to give people the freedom to give truly good customer support. Very recognizable.
Tiffany, come on in.
Yeah, so, I'd also flip this on it a little bit. I agree with everything that what people have said, but it's also part of employees want to work for brands where they agree with their values and sort of this mission-driven kind of attitude. They want to work for those kinds of companies, and customers want to buy from those kinds of companies, especially when you start looking generationally, in millennials or Gen Z. They have very different buying patterns and habits, and what is triggering things. It may not be price. It may actually be, listen, did you give away PPE equipment at the beginning of the pandemic out of your own storage? That's the insurance company I want to go with. Or, are you doing something to help our pets get fed and, our clothes being delivered and all of these things? I want to work there and I want to buy and consume from them. So I think that it also has a long-term impact on that kind of purpose over profit, that people want to align with companies that have that kind of attitude.
Jennifer, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I was going to exactly make that point. I think that one of the collateral impacts of COVID is that it has exposed a lot of fissures in our society. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I think, and the lack of leadership from the government, I think consumers now expect companies to step in where there's a void. And so, and it's not just, you'll remember that post the killing of George Floyd, a lot of companies put up on their Instagram, it went black, it was Black Lives Matter. And what people said is, hey, well, what are you really doing? And take a look in your leadership ranks, and is there diversity and is there inclusion? And I think going forward, as Tiffany said, that's going to be the price of admission. And so if people don't believe in your brand and respect the things that you're doing, and if your employees also don't, you're not going to have a business left. And so I think where in the past it was all about the shareholders, now I think that if you want to have an ongoing business, people have to believe in what you're doing and if you want to survive.
Well,
and so I think it's really important.
Yeah, I agree. Let's go there. Brian, at Chipotle, you were at Taco Bell for a long time. You've been at Chipotle. Chipotle is all about, cultivating a better world, right? That's been kind of your mission for a long time. And I do think, ESG, there's some greenwashing going on, but I feel like something's happening different where customers are really looking at a company, a brand, their impact on the climate, the impact on the world, how they treat their employees. Brian, how do you see it? Like, what's changed? What's different? I mean, this has been your guys' mission for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, we've got close to 100,000 employees, and whenever I ask them, why do they like working at Chipotle? One of the first places they start is the whole mission around food with integrity and all the sustainability efforts around how we do that, how we farm better, how we raise animals better, and then how that all ultimately plays out to the planet is hugely why a lot of folks are at Chipotle. And I just think in general, it's becoming more and more important. Just recently we added this feature for an order at Chipotle. When you get a burrito or a bowl, we basically break down for you our approach to farming and our approach to sustainability, how that compares to conventional farming and conventional practices in the food supply chain. And, we break it down based on soil, water, carbon emissions. And I'll tell you what, the engagement around that is shocking. And the engagement around
What's shocking about it? You mean just everybody interested in it?
Yeah, that was about to say. And what I was most shocked by is the kids under the age of 30, the level of engagement on this was, we knew we were doing the right thing to do this, but I was just surprised at the amount of feedback we got, how much people, of course, are pushing us to do more on it, obviously, but just the appreciation of being transparent on this and then informing people, because real time while you're building your order, it can demonstrate how certain, if you choose to do sofritas, which is a plant-based protein versus steak, has a different impact on soil and emissions. And I knew we would get a positive response. Our employees are very proud of the fact that we do this,
Right.
But I was surprised at how strong the response was from people under the age of 30.
Peter, at Nordstrom, I mean, diversity, inclusion, how has that changed the conversation at Nordstrom because of this year?
Well, I think Brian mentioned it earlier. It's been really eye-opening, I think, to go there and to be vulnerable and to open yourselves up to feedback. We're all in the customer business, and I think, really naturally inclined to be attuned to what's going on with customers. And as such, an inclusive environment is the best environment to have. You're trying to draw a lot of customers, but it just was made so clear how much more there was behind this. And if you're not open to really hear it and understand from everybody, then you wouldn't know. And it created an opportunity for us to have a lot of great feedback that I think is going to serve us really well. It's certainly the right thing to do in terms of how you treat employees and customers. But I think even beyond that is something probably we're all going through, is that, and it's mentioned a little bit with younger customers, there's an expectation around brands that they actually have a personality, they have an ethos, they stand for something, and you can't kind of stand for nothing. You can't just be agnostic and not in the game. So I think it's allowed us to know that it's okay to go there, and it's And it's okay to be declarative about our intentions around being inclusive and to valuing people and respecting people, all people.
Go ahead, Rob. Go ahead, jump in.
Yeah, the last thing that Peter was saying really resonated with me. We have one of the 10 largest asset management companies in the world, PGIM, and so we've been at the front edge of a lot of the ESG initiatives because you've seen it actually first in the asset management space. But the inclusion and diversity and the expectations of both employees and customers that historically companies would be neutral, right? If it directly aligned or touched your business, your product, your customer, then you would engage. But otherwise, you basically said, that's a societal issue, not a business issue. Yet today, if you take that approach, I think you isolate yourself. There is a very clear shift that's occurred, and particularly this year with the combination of societal unrest that's associated with the incidents that you mentioned earlier, as well as the pandemic and the very uneven way in which this pandemic has been felt, both from a health and from an economic standpoint. And as a result of that, it has really highlighted or spotlighted the attentions on these issues and the expectations by your customers and, as I said, your employees, that you take positions. And that's been new to us because as a culture, we're a very quiet company. And we've had, and we're very proud of our inclusion and diversity. We're headquartered in Newark, and we've stayed in Newark and helped rebuild the city. So, we've been at this for quite some time, but in a quiet way. And I think doing it in a quiet way is frankly much less acceptable today than it used to be.
We just have about 4 or 5 minutes left. So I've got 2 quick questions, and I'm going to ask all of you to be brief because I do want to get to all of you when I ask it. The question is, creating a customer-first culture within a company, how does that filter down from the CEO to the person on the sales floor, at the checkout counter, at the customer going to your website? So how does it filter down from the CEO? I'm going to start with you, Jennifer.
I think that you just have to keep asking, what about the customer? What about the customer? Making them, for us, one of the other benefits of COVID is that we're doing all of our sales meetings virtually. And we have so many people listening in to the dialogue that we actually had somebody who canceled a meeting because they said, oh my God, we don't want to have so many people, but it's such a great way for the marketing department, for the designers, for the people who are developing to hear what the customer has to say. And I'm talking about our retailer customers. And so, when people get into their opinion, I keep focusing them down on, but what about the customer? And is it meaningful to them?
Sumit, you take it next. Creating a customer-first culture within a company. How does it filter down from you as the head?
You own it, you live it, you lead from the front. I'll give you an example. I have a practice that I've maintained pretty much my career, and my employees, my team members, my company knows it. Every Saturday morning, Sumit wakes up at 4:45 a.m., spends 2 hours browsing through every review that comes through our website, even now, and kind of going through customer reviews. And I filter these reviews across departments. Mm-hmm. And what we're looking for is if a customer is expressing in any area where a customer is expressing delighters or disappointment, what we are internally making sure is if there are delighters, our teams are saying, can we double down on this? If there are disappointments, we're actually saying, hey, is there a defect metric? Is there a metric inside the company that tracks that defect? And if not, can we create it? And if it is everything within control? And so, when you build a culture like that, you're essentially anticipating. You're essentially working backwards from the customer at every given moment, and you're never out of sync with where the customer is and where your employees are and where your culture should be. So that's sort of what our approach is.
All right, I'm going to shift the question for the rest of you because we're running out of time. What's necessary to stay relevant to be the next generation of customer-centric businesses? And you have to have a quick answer. Barbara, you pick it up. Quick.
Agility.
Ooh.
Listening.
Well done. Peter, an audience.
You have to empower your employees so that it's a great place to work. If you feel that you cannot influence the results, you'll never get the really talented people. So customer facing, but also internally, everybody should feel empowered to influence the results of their work.
Great. Rob.
investment in talent.
Nice. Tiffany.
Start with your people, the rest will follow.
Great, great. I see a theme. Brian McNamara.
Yeah, link everything you do to your purpose and to deliver for your consumers.
And I'm going to get the final thought from where I started. Brian, over at Chipotle.
Yeah, great people that are committed to understanding where you are in culture and how you can lead culture. That's what we're always looking for, and I think that's how you stay on the front end of things.
All right. And actually, I gotta leave it there. I wish we had more time. All of you, thank you so much for your time today. Pretty incredible conversation, and I really appreciate it. Stay safe. Thank you to everybody for your incredible insights and our discussion and being part of our Bloomberg 50 celebration. We really appreciate it, and great to just kind of hear what you guys are thinking and what you're going through and kind of where we're going. And I do want to thank again our sponsor, Salesforce, for their support. Visit the sponsor section of the event website and you can download their State of the Connected Customer Report. Lots of good information there. Thank you again, everybody. Have a great holiday season. Stay safe, be well. Thank you.